"Sir, please marry my mommy." 5-year-old Nadia didn't plan on disrupting a billionaire's lunch. But when she saw the cold, powerful man eating alone, she knew he was the one. Her mommy was always tired, always sad, and Nadia didn't have a daddy. So she made her move. What she didn't expect was for the billionaire to follow her home. What he didn't expect was to fall for the woman on the couch, burning with fever and burdened by years of loneliness. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The clink of polished silver against porcelain echoed softly beneath the shaded canopy of Le Jardin, an elite outdoor restaurant nestled atop the 48th floor of one of the city's most opulent skyscrapers. The air was laced with the scent of fresh roses, aged wine, and truffle oil. Everything was pristine, controlled, expensive, untouchable. At a corner table, away from the murmuring elites and their champagne flutes, sat Elijah Crane. Clad in a tailored charcoal suit, the man was the very embodiment of urban royalty. His eyes scanned the financial reports on his tablet as he slowly lifted a forkful of seared duck breast to his lips. No one approached him. Ever. The servers kept a respectful distance, his bodyguard stood a few feet away, discreet but alert, and even the humming city seemed to hush itself when Elijah dined. That was why it was so jarring when a small, hesitant voice broke through the quiet. Excuse me, mister." He blinked. For a moment, he thought it was the wind playing tricks. But then again, closer this time. "Sir, please marry my mommy." Elijah slowly looked up from his screen. Standing before him was a little girl, no more than 5 years old, with tangled chestnut curls and a smudge of chocolate on her cheek. Her sundress was wrinkled and slightly too big, and her sandals looked worn. In her hand was a crumpled piece of paper, what looked like a drawing, scrawled in colorful crayon. He stared at her, silent. "I saw you from the sidewalk," she continued, clutching the drawing tighter. "You look rich, and kind, and like the prince in my bedtime book." A few tables nearby had gone completely still, ears clearly tuned to the strange, unscripted moment. A waiter started to step in, but Elijah lifted a hand without even looking, halting him in place. The girl's lip trembled. "My mommy's lonely. She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. She doesn't have a husband. And I don't have a daddy. I thought maybe you could be him." Elijah blinked. The words felt unreal, too sincere, too sharp. He slowly set down his fork. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice deep and controlled, yet slightly softer than usual. "Nadia," she said, nodding. "My mommy's name is Anita. Where is your mother now?" "She's at home. Lying down. She said she was tired, but her face was really dull. I think she's sick. That's why I came to find help." "How did you get here?" "I followed one of your men up the elevator," she said. Elijah leaned back slightly in his chair, trying to process what the girl was saying. She didn't have the wild desperation of someone coached or manipulative. There was something heartbreakingly earnest in her tone, the kind of raw honesty only children could possess. "Nadia," he said carefully, "do you often go up to strangers and ask them to marry your mother?" She shook her head vehemently. "No. Mommy says never talk to strangers. But you didn't look mean. You looked like someone who could help." There it was again, that strange twisting in his chest. He rubbed the space just above his heart like it itched. He stood slowly. "Where do you live?" Nadia pointed past the patio's railing, toward the maze of streets far below. "Near the bakery with the cat in the window. I can show you." His bodyguard took a half step forward. "Mr. Crane." "It's fine," Elijah said. "Bring the car around." He turned to Nadia and offered his hand, not something he'd done in years, possibly decades. She took it without hesitation, her tiny fingers wrapping trustingly around his. They walked together through the restaurant, past confused diners and stunned staff, a billionaire led away by a child's plea. As they entered the elevator, Nadia looked up at him and whispered, "I knew you'd listen." Elijah looked down at her, and for a fleeting second, he wondered if this little girl had just done what entire boards of directors, media moguls, and negotiators couldn't: disarm him. And so began something he never saw coming. The black town car rolled slowly through narrow, uneven streets that had long forgotten the feel of luxury tires. The buildings here leaned close to one another, a patchwork of peeling paint, rusted balcony railings, and the faint, ever-present scent of baked bread and engine oil. Elijah sat back in the leather seat, Nadia perched beside him, her small hand still tightly clinging to his. She had insisted on sitting beside him, even when the bodyguard offered to sit in between. Her presence was unshakable, tiny, warm, and strangely grounding. "Almost there," she said, peeking out the window. "It's the one with the orange door and the crack down the steps." Elijah glanced at the buildings they passed. This neighborhood was far removed from the manicured streets and penthouses he was used to. Life here was not easy. You could feel it in the chipped curbs, the flickering street lamps, the laundry lines strung between windows like surrendered flags. The car slowed. "That one," Nadia pointed. "Right there." The driver pulled up in front of a squat, two-story apartment complex with fading blue trim. There were bicycles chained outside, and a cat watched them from a second-floor windowsill, tail flicking lazily. As Elijah stepped out of the car, several curious eyes peeked from behind curtains and cracked doors. A man in a business suit didn't often show up here, especially not escorted by a black vehicle and a suited guard. Nadia tugged his hand. "Come on. We live on the second floor. My mommy didn't want us to move here at first, but it was the only place she could afford after she got really sick last year." Elijah said nothing, just followed her up the creaking stairs. She pushed open the door without knocking. "Mommy, I brought someone." The apartment was small, lived in but clean. Faint watercolor paintings, Anita's, he assumed, lined the walls. A toy unicorn sat on the couch next to a stack of overdue mail. There were little signs of love everywhere. A flower in a chipped vase, tiny handprints painted on paper taped to the fridge, Nadia's name written in glitter glue. But then he saw her. Anita. She was lying on the couch, curled up in a thin throw blanket, her skin flushed with fever and damp with sweat. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes fluttered open weakly at the sound of her daughter's voice. "Nadia," she whispered, trying to sit up, but she immediately winced, clutching her head. "Mommy, you're still hot," Nadia said, rushing to her side. "I brought someone who can help." Elijah stepped forward then. His eyes met Anita's for the first time. Even sick and flushed, she was beautiful. Not in the way models or actresses were, but something quieter, softer. Her hair was a tangle of waves spilling over the pillow. Her eyes, though hazy with fever, held a weary sort of depth. She tried to sit up again, this time confused, trying to understand what kind of man stood in her doorway. "Who?" "You're burning up," Elijah said, voice low but firm. "You need a doctor." Anita's brows drew together. "Wait, who are you?" "Nadia, what did you?" "I asked him to marry you," Nadia said proudly. "He's rich. And nice. And he came." Anita blinked at her daughter, then at Elijah, who was already kneeling beside the couch, his hand gently brushing against her forehead. "You're running a high fever," he said, ignoring the startled look in her eyes. "Have you eaten today?" "Aye," she started, but her voice cracked. He turned to his bodyguard. "Tell the driver to start the car again. We're taking her to Westbridge Private." Anita immediately struggled to rise, alarmed. "No, wait, I can't afford." "You're not paying for anything," Elijah said sharply. "You can argue with me later." Nadia was already grabbing her mother's purse, swinging it over her shoulder like she'd done it before. She held the door open wide. "Let's go, Mommy. Mr. Elijah said he'll help." Anita tried to protest again, but her body betrayed her. Her limbs were too heavy, her head spinning. She gasped slightly as strong arms lifted her effortlessly from the couch. "Wah, hey! Put me down!" she protested weakly, her fingers pushing against his chest. "No," Elijah said simply, carrying her like she weighed nothing. "You've been sick long enough." Outside, The neighbors gawked as the billionaire stepped down the stairs with a woman in his arms and a child clinging to his coat. Whispers buzzed like flies. He didn't care. Inside the car, Anita leaned against his chest, too dizzy to fight anymore. Her heart pounded, not just from the fever, but from the surrealness of it all. She was being held by a man she had never met, whose touch was warm, steady, protective. Nadia leaned across from the other seat, beaming. "See, Mommy? I told you someone would come." Elijah looked down at the sick woman resting in his arms. He had no idea why he had come, but he didn't regret it. Not even a little. The private hospital wing smelled of antiseptic, lavender air diffusers, and sterile perfection. Everything gleamed, floors so polished they mirrored the ceiling lights, walls painted in calming creams and blues. The nurses moved efficiently, almost silently, trained for discretion and comfort. Anita lay in the hospital bed, and 4 drip in her arm and a soft blanket pulled over her lap. Her hair had been brushed back by a nurse, her skin pale but no longer flushed with fever. The exhaustion had settled deep into her bones. She blinked against the soft morning light filtering through the blinds, her body heavy but her mind beginning to stir. She turned her head and froze. Sitting in the corner of the room, legs crossed, was Elijah Crane. His suit jacket was draped over the back of a nearby chair, his sleeves rolled up, and a tablet balanced on his knee. But he wasn't looking at it. He was watching her. Quietly, calmly, intently. Her voice cracked. "You're still here?" He uncrossed his legs and stood slowly. "You've been asleep for almost 12 hours. The doctors said the infection should break by morning, and it has." Anita tried to sit up, then immediately winced. He was at her side in seconds, adjusting the bed controls with a grace that didn't match his cold reputation. "You shouldn't move too quickly. The antibiotics are working, but your body's still recovering." She stared at him, dazed. "Why are you even here?" Before he could answer, a knock at the door was followed by a burst of energy and a squeal. "Mommy!" Nadia rushed in, a coloring book in her arms, followed closely by a smiling nurse who gave Anita a thumbs up and then disappeared into the hallway. Anita caught her daughter in a loose hug, brushing a kiss against her head. "Hi, baby." Nadia climbed onto the bed beside her and whispered, "You scared me." But Mr. Elijah stayed all night. He sat there and didn't even go home. Anita's eyes slid over to the man who stood so quietly beside the hospital bed. He didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't look out of place. But he definitely didn't belong in her world. "Mr. Crane," she said, the effort of formality stiff on her tongue. "I appreciate what you did. But you didn't have to." "I did." The firmness in his tone caught her off guard. "I'm not the type to entertain 5-year-olds with wild imaginations," he added, glancing at Nadia, whose face beamed with pride. "She told me you were sick." She wasn't wrong. Anita sighed, settling back into the pillows. Her gaze drifted toward the window. "We're not a charity case." "I didn't say you were. You paid for private care. A personal nurse. Medication I couldn't afford in a decade. Do you know how humiliating that is?" He folded his arms, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in measured restraint. "You'd rather lie on a couch and let your body shut down than accept help from someone capable of giving it?" Anita flinched. His words were a little too accurate. A little too sharp. "I didn't ask you to." "No," he interrupted. "Your daughter did. And whether or not you believe it, that took a hell of a lot of courage." Anita blinked at him, startled. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. Nadia, oblivious to the adult tension in the room, held up her drawing. "Look, Mommy. I fixed it. Now the man has a face." Anita took the picture gently. It was simple, stick figures, crayon colors, glitter glue. But the man standing next to her and Nadia now had a suit, a smile, and eyes the same as the one watching her from across the bed. Elijah watched the exchange, something unreadable in his expression. "I should go," he said finally, rolling down his sleeves. "You need rest." Anita looked at him as he reached for his jacket. "Why did you really come with her yesterday?" He paused, turned, and said almost reluctantly, "I didn't know." She frowned. I just didn't want to say no. He walked out before she could find a response. That evening, after dinner, a soft knock echoed at her hospital room door. Come in, Anita called, expecting a nurse. But in walked Elijah again, this time with a tray. She blinked. What is that? Dinner, he said. Hospital food is a human rights violation. You can't argue that. She stared at the tray. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, a roll. And, was that a slice of apple tart? I had it sent in from a cafe downtown, he said, setting it down beside her. And I brought juice for Nadia. Nadia squealed and dove into the cup, giggling. Anita looked at him, incredulous. You really don't know how to act like a normal person, do you? He tilted his head. I'm not a normal person. And you're okay with that? I'm learning. Anita looked at him for a long time, then slowly picked up the fork. She took a bite. It was good. Too good. Damn him. And that was the first time she didn't push him away. The hospital released Anita 3 days later, under strict instructions to rest, hydrate, and avoid stress. An impossible prescription for a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. But when she stepped through the front door of her apartment with Nadia's hand in hers, something had changed. The smell of bleach and citrus greeted her first. The living room, usually cluttered with scattered toys and art supplies, was spotless. The carpet had been vacuumed, the couch cushions fluffed, the kitchen sink empty and shining. Anita blinked, stunned. What the? There was a note taped to the fridge, written in smooth, confident handwriting. I hired a cleaner. Don't fight me on this. I don't lose arguments. Elijah. Anita tore the note down, glaring at it as if it might combust. That man has no boundaries. Nadia, twirling in the living room like a ballerina, laughed. He said he's coming later. He's bringing groceries. Anita dropped her bag on the couch. Oh, wonderful. Is he trying to buy our entire existence now? I think he just likes helping us, Nadia replied sweetly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Anita ran a hand through her hair and sighed. She didn't know what to do with a man like Elijah Crane. He didn't operate in any logic she recognized. Wealthy men didn't rescue sick strangers. They didn't play babysitter. They didn't clean your home, or bring groceries for that matter. But sure enough, 2 hours later, there was a knock on the door. Anita opened it to find Elijah standing there in rolled-up sleeves again, 2 large paper bags in his arms, and a baguette sticking out of one. I hope you like Italian, he said simply, brushing past her like he had a right to enter. You didn't need to. You say that a lot, he interrupted, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. I've noticed. Because it's true. He turned, raising a brow. And yet here I am. Again. Anita folded her arms across her chest, already exhausted by the verbal dance. What are you even doing here? He looked at her flatly. Making dinner. She let out a short laugh. You, Mr. Iceberg in a suit, knows how to cook. I'm capable of following basic instructions, he said dryly, pulling pasta, herbs, garlic, and sauce ingredients from the bags. Anita leaned against the doorway, watching him with cautious amusement. To his credit, Elijah didn't pretend to be a chef. He read the recipe off his phone, squinting at the text while trying not to slice off a finger. When he dropped a tomato and it rolled under the fridge, he looked at it like it had betrayed him. I'm not sure this stove is adequate, he muttered. Anita burst out laughing, the sound catching her by surprise. She clutched her stomach as the laughter bubbled out, louder and freer than it had been in months. You're absolutely ridiculous. And yet the water's boiling, he said smugly. Nadia sat at the kitchen table, coloring and humming, occasionally offering sage advice like don't burn the noodles. It was surreal. Elijah Crane, the man Fortune magazine once called the Ice Prince of Wall Street, was in her tiny kitchen, wearing an apron with a faded cartoon lemon on it, an apron she forgot she owned, and carefully pouring pasta into a pot. And oddly, Anita didn't feel invaded. She felt seen. An hour later, they sat around her cramped dining table, a mismatched trio eating 2 salty penne with garlic bread on paper plates. Nadia slurped loudly, then announced, Mommy never lets anyone sit in Daddy's chair. Anita stiffened slightly. The room fell into a quiet that was heavy but not awkward, just real. Elijah looked at Anita. Would you prefer I move? No, she said softly. It's okay. Nadia didn't notice the shift. She kept talking. But I think Daddy would have liked you. He liked quiet people. Except Mommy. Mommy talks a lot. Anita gave her daughter a pointed look. Thank you, darling. Elijah chuckled, surprising himself. I like people who talk. Anita met his eyes across the table, her smile softening. Later, after Nadia had been bathed and tucked into bed, Anita walked Elijah to the door. She stopped just short of opening it. Why are you doing all this? She asked, voice low. He hesitated. The hallway light flickered softly behind him. Because I can, he said honestly. Because she asked. Because I didn't know how lonely you looked until I saw it for myself. Anita swallowed. I'm not your project, she said, not unkindly. I'm not a problem for you to solve. I don't see you that way. Then what do you see? He looked at her, really looked. I see something I wasn't expecting. And I'm not sure what it means yet. She stood still, her hand resting on the doorframe. You don't need to figure it all out tonight, she murmured. I'm not leaving, he replied. Then, with a small nod, he stepped out into the night. And for the first time since her husband died, Anita didn't feel entirely alone in the silence. The rain started before dawn, soft at first, like whispers on the windows, then escalated into a relentless downpour that soaked the city in gray. The sky remained dark well into the morning, and the flickering light in Anita's apartment hallway was no match for the gloom. She stood in the kitchen, cradling a steaming mug of tea, her fingers curled tightly around the warmth. Nadia sat on the floor nearby, humming to herself as she arranged her crayons by color, then by size, then by how happy each one looked. Anita wasn't humming. There was a tightness in her chest she couldn't quite name. Something like a warning. A prickle on the back of her neck that had nothing to do with fever or weather. At 9:02 a.m., someone knocked. A hard, impatient knock. She froze. No one knocked like that here. Nadia looked up. Is it Mr. Elijah? Anita shook her head. He texts. The knock came again, sharper this time, like a demand. Anita set down her mug slowly and walked to the door, pressing her eye to the peephole. Her stomach dropped. Two people stood on the other side of the door. A middle-aged woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a sharply tailored coat, and a tall man with a stiff jaw and cold, familiar eyes. Anita's hands trembled. She opened the door halfway, blocking Nadia from view with her body. Hello, Anita, said the woman, her voice clipped and polished like glass. Margaret. Thomas. Anita's voice was barely above a whisper. Why are you here? Margaret Bennett didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside with an air of entitlement so thick, it displaced the very air in the room. Her husband followed, his shoulders square, his expression tight. You're still in this place, Margaret said, glancing around with thinly veiled disdain. After all these years, our son would have wanted better for his daughter. Anita closed the door slowly behind them, her heart pounding. Nadia, go to your room, please. Nadia looked up in confusion. But, now, sweetheart, Anita said more firmly. Take your crayons. Nadia frowned but obeyed. As she walked past the strangers, Thomas gave her a once-over. No warmth. No grandfatherly softness. Just judgment. When her bedroom door clicked shut, Anita turned, her body a shield, her voice iron. You have no right to show up here. We have every right, Margaret said. We are Nadia's grandparents. We've given you time, Anita. More than enough. But watching from a distance hasn't worked. Anita felt something cold curl in her gut. What are you saying? We want custody. Anita's throat constricted. Her breath hitched in her lungs. Thomas spoke now, voice low and firm. You're unstable. Living in a dangerous neighborhood. You were hospitalized last week. And we have reason to believe a man, an unrelated man, is spending the night here with our granddaughter. Anita's vision blurred. This is my child, she hissed. Not yours. You abandoned us after Owen died. We distanced ourselves, Margaret corrected, because you were unfit to cope. And now you've proven it again. Anita could barely hear over the roaring in her ears. And then another knock. 3 soft taps. She didn't need to check. She already knew. She opened the door. Elijah Crane stood there, Nadia dripping at his side, navy suit immaculate despite the storm. He took one look at her pale face and stepped inside. Margaret stiffened. Who? Elijah's presence shifted the air like a tide. He looked at the couple with the same expression he wore during hostile board takeovers, controlled, unreadable, deadly. Elijah Crane, he said evenly. Anita's friend, and the man paying for her medical care. Thomas narrowed his eyes. So it's true. Elijah's jaw ticked. What's true? That you've been involved. Anita stepped forward, voice trembling but steady. They want custody of Nadia. Elijah didn't react, not outwardly. But his entire posture changed. His stance widened. His hand flexed once slowly at his side. No, he said simply. Margaret bristled. Excuse me. You're not taking her child, Elijah said. Try, and you'll be in court so long your grandchildren will have grandchildren. You can't possibly have a legal. I can and will, he interrupted. And I have the resources to make sure your name never appears on another custody form again. Silence stretched. Anita stared at him, stunned. Margaret's lips twitched. You don't know what she's like when no one's watching. I know enough, Elijah said. I know she fought to stay alive while caring for a child alone. I know she refused help until her body gave out. And I know that little girl adores her mother more than anything in this world. Thomas looked at Anita, sharp. So you're sleeping with this man now? Anita flinched. No. He's helping us. That's all. Elijah's eyes flicked to her, unreadable. Not yet, he said. Everyone turned to him. Anita's heart skipped. What? He didn't break eye contact with her. But I'm not going anywhere. So you may want to adjust your expectations. Margaret's face turned white. Thomas's fists clenched. We'll be speaking to our lawyer, he said. Do that, Elijah replied calmly. I'll have mine waiting. The Bennetts left in a storm of stiff shoulders and clipped heels. The door slammed behind them. Anita slumped against the wall, shaking. Elijah moved to her side immediately. Are you all right? She looked up at him, eyes wide. You just declared war on 2 of the most vindictive people I know. He shrugged. They picked the wrong battlefield. She stared at him. Why would you even? Because no one threatens you in front of me. Ever. Anita's throat closed. She didn't cry. Not this time. But something inside her cracked open. And he saw it. It had been 2 days since the confrontation. Since the storm. The Bennett couple hadn't returned. Physically, anyway, but the ripple of their visit lingered. Like smoke in the air. The kind of discomfort you could still smell, even after it was gone. Anita sat on the couch, a throw blanket over her lap, her sketch pad in hand. She hadn't drawn in weeks. Maybe longer. But tonight, the pencil moved almost on its own, curving across the page in careful lines. A quiet figure was beginning to take shape, broad shoulders, a proud chin, a watch glinting on one wrist. She paused, then erased it. In the kitchen, Elijah stood over a small pot of tea, looking comically oversized in the cramped space. He had his sleeves rolled again, this time with a small flour streak on one wrist from helping Nadia with a failed attempt at cookie making earlier. A faint smear of green marker had somehow ended up on his left cheek, a gift from Nadia, who had insisted he needed decorating. He hadn't even noticed. Anita glanced at him, then back at her sketchbook. Are you going to stand there and pretend to know how to boil water? She said dryly. Or are you going to ask for help? Elijah turned toward her, one eyebrow raised. I'm attempting to learn by observation. Observing what? The kettle doing all the work. He looked back at the pot, then back at her. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Anita smiled despite herself. A little. The whistle of the kettle cut through the air. Elijah moved with his usual grace, controlled, deliberate, and poured the hot water into 2 mugs with chamomile tea bags already waiting. He brought them over and handed one to her. Anita accepted it, her fingers brushing his just briefly. but the contact lingered in her mind longer than it should have. They sat in silence for a while. Nadia had already gone to bed, tucked in with a new story and a new favorite plush toy Elijah had brought, an oversized white polar bear she'd named Mr. Fancy. Anita blew gently on her tea. You didn't have to come back after the Bennetts showed up. I know. She glanced at him. But you did. I told you, he said, voice even. I'm not leaving. Anita looked down into her cup. The tea bag floated lazily. They don't know what it was like. After Owen died. They think I broke. Maybe I did. I was angry all the time. At him. At myself. At the world. Elijah was quiet, letting her speak without interruption. He had this way of disappearing emotionally, she continued softly. He'd smile for Nadia, say the right things, but something inside him was already gone. I kept hoping I could fix it, that if I just loved him hard enough, he'd come back. She paused, her throat tightening. But depression doesn't work like that. It swallows people. And one morning, he just didn't wake up. Elijah didn't move, but his hand slowly shifted, resting on the armrest close enough that Anita could feel the warmth of it near hers. I thought maybe it was my fault, she whispered, for being too much, or not enough. It wasn't, Elijah said quietly, firmly. Anita looked at him then. His eyes held none of the detachment he was known for in boardrooms or press interviews. They weren't cold at all tonight. They were steady, gentle, a sea after a storm. He exhaled slowly, then leaned back on the couch, eyes focused on the ceiling. My mother left when I was 8, he said, almost absently. Packed a suitcase while my father was on a business trip. Left me with a note and the maid. Anita's eyes widened. She said she was tired of pretending, that being a wife and mother wasn't what she wanted. I never saw her again. Elijah, Anita whispered. My father buried himself in work. Built an empire, neglected a child. I learned to survive by being perfect. Untouchable. Unfeeling. He chuckled without humor. Cold, as the media likes to say. Anita didn't know what to say. It was the most personal thing he'd shared. With anyone, probably. He turned his head toward her. Then I met your daughter. And she asked me to marry you before I knew your name. And instead of brushing her off like I should have, I followed her home. She held her breath. He leaned in slightly, elbows on his knees, his voice low. You scare me, Anita. Her brows furrowed. What? You and her. The way you laugh. The way you keep going, even when you're falling apart. You make me feel things I've spent years locking away. Anita's heart pounded. I don't know how to do this, he said. Neither do I, she whispered. He reached out then slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't. Their fingers touched, tentatively then fully. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a declaration. But it was something. Something fragile and real. She looked down at their hands. You know what scares me? She asked. He waited. How easy this is becoming. Elijah nodded. I've spent my whole life controlling everything, he said. But this I'm letting happen. And she believed him. It was a warm Saturday morning, the kind that smelled like new sunlight and sidewalk chalk. The rain from earlier in the week had washed the city clean, leaving behind puddles that glistened like glass under the golden sky. Birds chirped somewhere above the rooftops. The world felt, however briefly, like it had pressed pause on its noise. Inside Anita's apartment, the mood was unusually still. Not heavy, not tense, just waiting. Anita sat cross-legged on the living room floor, brushing tangles from Nadia's hair with slow, methodical strokes. The child was unusually quiet, lips pursed, eyes focused on the corner of the room where something was being hidden behind her toy box. Anita narrowed her eyes. What are you up to, Munchkin? Nadia glanced back with the innocent guilt only a child could pull off. Nothing. Nadia. I said nothing, she whispered dramatically. Before Anita could investigate further, a knock came at the door. It was the kind of knock she'd come to recognize, polite, even-tempered, and almost hesitant. She stood, smoothing her sweater, and opened it to find Elijah standing there with a small bakery box in hand. Croissants, he said. I passed the cafe. Thought of you. Anita blinked. You thought of me while passing carbs? He smirked. They're chocolate-filled. That makes them worth the guilt. Nadia scrambled toward him, her socks sliding on the floor. Did you bring the flower juice too? Orange juice, he corrected, handing her a bottle. But yes, your flower juice is inside. Anita stepped aside to let him in. We've created a monster. Good. The world needs more small tyrants with charm. Elijah walked into the living room and froze. There, smack in the middle of the floor, was a hand-drawn card made from folded pink construction paper. Glittery letters sparkled across the front. You're invited. He looked down at it, and then slowly up at Nadia, who was now hiding half behind the armrest. Anita noticed too late. Nadia, she whispered, eyes widening. You said you weren't going to. It's okay, Nadia said quickly, stepping out with all the theatrical bravado of a child who'd rehearsed. It's not today, it's just an invitation. You can think about it. Elijah set the pastry box down carefully and picked up the card. He opened it. Inside was a stick figure drawing of 3 people. Nadia in the middle, Anita in a pretty pink dress, and Elijah wearing what looked like a crown and tie. Above their heads floated hearts, stars, and the unmistakable words, "Please marry my mommy. I'll bring the flowers." Anita's entire body flushed with mortified warmth. Nadia. She made it yesterday, she explained quickly, trying to grab the card. I told her this isn't something people just decide with crayons and... Elijah held the card gently, like it was glass. He looked up. His expression wasn't laughing. It wasn't mocking. It was unreadable. Except for the way his eyes lingered on Anita, like she'd just become something both familiar and completely new. Can I keep this? He asked Nadia. The little girl lit up. Really? He nodded. I've never been invited to a wedding by crayon before. Anita looked between the two of them, somewhere between astonishment and dread. You two cannot be serious. Elijah stepped forward then, toward Anita, past the toys, past the card, past her defenses. His voice was calm, measured. I've been thinking. Dangerous, she murmured. I know I said I didn't understand any of this, that I didn't know how to be this kind of man. But it turns out, he said, taking her hand, you don't have to know everything to want something. Or someone. Her heart stuttered. He ran his thumb gently across the back of her hand. I don't have a ring in my pocket. I didn't plan a speech. But I'm standing here in a room that's become the only place I sleep well, eat slow, and laugh more than I ever did in 20 years of running companies. Anita was frozen, tears catching just behind her eyes. I'm not asking you to marry me today, he continued. And I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm offering something better. Days when I carry the groceries and you yell at me for overcooking the pasta. Nights when I fall asleep listening to Nadia snore and you humming while you draw. A life. Not perfect, but honest. Real. Anita couldn't speak. Her throat burned. Her fingers trembled in his. Nadia watched from the couch, eyes wide, barely breathing. So, Elijah said quietly, will you let me try to make you happy? Not as a prince. Just as me. Anita blinked, and the first tear spilled over. She nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Nadia screamed like a firework went off. She launched herself into Elijah's legs, hugging him fiercely. I told you. I knew it. Anita laughed, half sobbing now, as Elijah crouched and pulled Nadia into his arms. I have one condition, Anita said, trying to steady her voice. He looked up, still holding her daughter. Don't wear a crown to the wedding. He gave a rare, crooked smile. No promises. Spring arrived softly that year. It didn't burst in with sudden blossoms or extravagant fanfare. Instead, it crept gently through the city, first in the light, in the way it lingered longer in the evenings. Then in the warmth, as if the wind had finally put down its bite. Even the trees seemed to take a deep breath and begin again. It was a perfect day for a wedding. Not the kind of wedding that made headlines or graced the pages of society magazines, though Elijah Crane's name alone could have guaranteed that. No, this was different. Intimate. Sacred. held in the garden courtyard of a small arts center tucked between old stone buildings and ivy-covered walls. It was exactly what Anita had imagined, if she'd ever let herself imagine such a thing. The space smelled like lavender and citrus. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze. White chairs, simple and unadorned, lined a cobblestone path dusted with rose petals. At the end of the aisle, Elijah stood beneath an archway woven with eucalyptus and cream-colored blooms. He wasn't wearing a crown, but Nadia, of course, had glued a tiny one to the back of her flower girl basket just in case. He looked different, not just in the bespoke navy suit or the tailored vest, though he wore them well. It was in his expression. There was a softness in his eyes now, a kind of reverence, a warmth he once buried under layers of steel and silence. He turned as the small string quartet played its first chords. And there she was. Anita stepped into view, a vision of understated grace in a champagne-colored dress that moved like water around her. Her hair was pinned with soft curls falling to one side, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers tied in a ribbon the same shade as Nadia's sash. She didn't float down the aisle. She walked. Steady, certain. Every step forward was a promise to herself, to allow joy, to trust, to love again. And every step she took, Elijah forgot how to breathe. Nadia went first, tossing petals with giddy excitement, waving at both sides of the small audience, mostly close friends, some of Anita's art community, a few of Elijah's most trusted colleagues. She threw the final handful of petals like confetti and beamed at her mom. "You look like a movie star." Anita smiled and touched her cheek. "Thank you, baby." Then she looked up and locked eyes with the man who had changed everything. He didn't need a vow to tell her how he felt. It was written all over him, etched in the lines of his jaw, softened at the corners of his mouth. Steady in the unwavering way he looked at her like she was the only thing that made sense in a world he had spent years trying to control. The officiant smiled as they joined hands. "Before we begin, I've been asked by a certain young lady to share a message," the officiant said with a wink. Anita raised an eyebrow. The officiant unfolded a small piece of paper and cleared his throat. "Dear Mommy and Mr. Elijah, I love you both a lot. Mommy, you're pretty. Mr. Elijah, you look serious, but you make good cookies. Please don't ever stop hugging or letting me sleep in the middle sometimes. And if you ever fight, just remember that I picked both of you. So be nice. Love, Nadia. P.S. Can I have cake now?" The entire courtyard laughed. Anita blinked back tears. Elijah chuckled under his breath and shook his head. "She's subtle," he murmured. "She takes after you," Anita shot back. When the vows were exchanged, there were no grand declarations, no promises of perfect days or fairy tale endings. Just simple, quiet truths. "I used to think strength was being untouchable," Elijah said. "Then I met a woman who showed me real strength was being seen. Completely. And choosing love anyway." Anita took his hand in both of hers. "I never thought I'd stand here again," she said, her voice soft, breaking just slightly. "But then you showed up, uninvited, unexpected, and completely necessary. You didn't fix my life. You stepped into it. And somehow that changed everything." The officiant smiled through misty eyes. "By the power vested in me by the state, and perhaps more importantly, Nadia, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Cheers erupted. Nadia threw more petals into the air. "You can kiss now. Go." Elijah leaned in and kissed Anita, not with fireworks or theatrics, but with deep reverence, like a man who understood what it meant to earn something sacred. The reception was held in the same garden. Lights strung through the trees flickered as the sun dipped below the rooftops. Children played tag between the tables. Music floated in the background. Laughter echoed beneath the stars. Anita stood near the dance floor, sipping champagne, her dress catching the last of the light. Elijah approached, his tie loosened, 2 buttons undone, sleeves rolled, still somehow immaculate, but entirely hers. "May I have this dance?" he asked. She placed her hand in his. "I thought you didn't dance." "I also didn't believe in happily ever after," he said. She smiled, tilting her head. "And now?" He pulled her close, swaying gently to a soft instrumental melody. "Now," he whispered, "I believe in mornings with you. I believe in Nadia's terrible drawings and cold coffee on busy days. I believe in the mess of it all. And I want every bit of it." They danced under the stars as the world faded around them. And somewhere nearby, Nadia twirled barefoot through the grass, singing a song she made up on the spot, her voice rising into the night. She was right all along. She had found her prince. But more importantly, she had given her mother back her fairy tale. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.